Take one. Okay. We got that out of our system. Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel. This is a reread for me way back when I was a kid. Blood and Chocolate. And of course you can't see it very well because they have this like filament, which, fun fact, I actually used to put filament onto these books during my like internship phase. So this is by Anita Curtis Klaus. I did not take notes on this book, but this book is so thin and so short. It did take me a very long time to read it just because, again, I was really busy. When I was younger, I feel like this is a very controversial book to talk about. I've looked at Goodreads reviews, and a lot of people, it's a very hit or miss book with people. Either people really, really love it or people really, really hate it. This book kind of teeters on me, like, kind of hating it for a couple of reasons. I feel like if this book came out like in nowadays age, I feel like a lot of people wouldn't like it because it's supposed to be geared towards like middle school students, grade school students, and the topics are very adult-esque. There's a lot of profanity. I've seen reviews of people saying like, yeah, profanity is just thrown left and right, like there's no rhyme or reason to it. And like, yeah, in the beginning there's a lot of that, but like after a while it kind of like slowly like fades out. It's funny because when I reread this book, I didn't remember a single thing from when I first read this book because I just didn't remember anything from it. I love how I'm talking and I'm not doing my makeup. It's a little backstory. I'm just putting moisturizer on because I didn't put moisturizer on this morning and my skin is super dry. I think because I was so young, I didn't really know what the hell it was talking about at certain points. Like I didn't get like I didn't fully comprehend the topics at hand. And now reading it as like an adult, in my head I'm like, why did I read this as a kid? Because like, I don't feel like grade school kids should read this book. It does feel very like profanity, like they use the word bitch and they use like motherfucker and things like that constantly. Like they call each other bitch like a lot in the book. I do have like somewhat of appreciation for this novel for when it came out because it like when this novel came out it like made headways of like, oh, like this is how like it kind of like started like the tropes of like horror with new modern werewolf stuff and like vampire stuff, because she came out with another book as well called The Silver Kiss, which I did read when I was younger. I'm not rereading that book ever again because that book was so slow. Like it was just so slow paced. Nothing really happened. I'm pretty sure I did a review on that one. I think I hate that book more than I dislike this book. This book, ironically, which I kind of wanted to do, I did kind of want to reread Silver Kiss because I wanted to do kind of like a comparison to Twilight, even though I never read Twilight. This is a werewolf novel, and the other book, Silver Kiss, is about vampires, and these books actually came out before Twilight did. Actually a few years before Twilight did. From the reviews that I've seen on Goodreads and like other people's opinions, a lot of people say that this book feels like Twilight was very heavily inspired by it. And I've seen the movies of Twilight, and in my head I'm kind of just like, I do get that vibe a little bit now that I reread this book. It has a lot more adult topics in it. There is incest, cougarism, there's underage drinking scenes, but there's underage like tones. By no means do I condone those topics. Like I don't think that like, you know, oh yeah, like I'm okay with incest. No, okay, I'm just reading the book. So like I said, this book is about werewolves. Well, it's funny because like it's supposed to be Lucian, I think that's what they're called. I forget what the term for werewolf is in Latin, even though I read so many like fantasy books, you would think that I would know by now. But in this novel, the word is pronounced a little bit differently. I'm gonna put it up on the screen somewhere. So her name is Vivian. She is the protagonist of the story. And I think a lot of people mistake her for being 14. I'm pretty sure she's 16 because she mentions later on there's like this ritual that these werewolves do, and apparently anyone who's over the age of 16, any girl that's over the age of 16 can like be a part of this ritual. So it's therefore known that she's 16. Well, she's older than 16 or whatever, because I think she had her 16th birthday. But for some reason, I heard that some people thought that she was 14, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure she's not 14. I think she's supposed to be 16. She lives with her mother, Esme, which, I don't know about you, but I've only ever heard that name in one other book. It's pretty popular. They are from, I forget where they're from. I think they live in Europe. I can't remember. So they had to move to this new town. They used to live in like a very like wooded area. They had to move because they're like a pack of wolves. They can transform into like what is similar to like a wolf. They don't consider themselves wolves for whatever reason, even though Vivian is like, oh yeah, that's the closest thing that we're compared to. And her family had to move because the younger wolves, which was a pack of boys, and she was friends with them, and she's still kind of sort of friends with them, and they're called the Five. I forget what their names are because they're like super, super ridiculous names. I only remember Ren, just because he gives me like bad boy version of Jacob, just because he is described as having very long hair and is kind of just a bad boy. And so basically he has a thing for Vivian, but like Vivian turns him down consistently, and it's very like every like flirtation thing like max it up to like bar type of version of flirtation of like a creepy guy kind of hitting on you. That's how all the flirting, that kind of version. It was a different werewolf, and Vivian had a crush on him, and he basically killed somebody. And apparently like when they kill people, because they're not supposed to kill people, when they kill them sometimes they have a taste for blood and then they can't stop doing that. So he did that, he got caught, and they took him to trial and stuff like that, and like they were trying to pin the fact that like, oh, you're a werewolf, this and this and this, and nobody believed this one person who had witnessed the crime. And what ended up happening was that like the trial, he went to jail, but then like because it was a pack of, you know, young wolves, they managed to like help him out by like killing other people. So the pack of five, they were like teenagers too, because they're all teenagers. They ended up killing other people to prove that, hey, he's innocent, like the killings are still going on. But like the one person who believed that they were werewolves still, you know, was pissed that he got released or whatever. But like the pack, her pack ended up disowning the one person who started the crime and said like, you can never come back here, whatever. But still that didn't help anything, because then this human who believed that they were werewolves came back to their place, their home, and burned everything down. So then they had to move, and then Vivian sadly loses her father, and her father so happened to be the pack leader. They didn't have a pack leader for like a few months, and they moved to a new town, and Vivian is like super, super heartbroken, and she has like a few moments throughout the novel where she like does miss her dad, and she's like sad, and she's pissed that her mom is like out here flirting with other guys, and like her mom sometimes has like a couple of moments of like, oh, I miss him though, and I did love him, but like at the same time like she's still flirting with other guys who are younger than her, mind you. Her mom's supposed to be like 40, and she's like hitting on like 20-something-year-old guys. Like that's how this novel is. I forgot to do my soap eyebrows. Excuse me while I do that. Because they also did make a film out of this book. And the film is like, it's better in the sense that it doesn't have all the raunchy, I guess there is like some raunchy scenes, but it doesn't have those profanic scenes. And the ending is like completely different. Like the characters are also really different. Like for some reason, like they made Vivian a lot more sweet and nice and innocent. In the novel, she's like top, like kind of popular girl, but nobody wants to be friends with her because she does go to school. Nobody wants to be friends with her because they're very intimidated by her, but she's also kind of like, oh, I don't care if you like me, but I do care, I want to have friends. Like she's kind of that person, I hate to say it, but she is a bitch. She has like that very like authoritative personality. Like she's a leader, but she's also kind of like an asshole too at the same time. And her logic way of thinking is like, she thinks that she knows everything, but she doesn't truly, right? And they own a shop. They own like this, I forget what it's called, but they own this like sweet shop or whatever, and it's not mentioned too much in the book all that much. It's just mentioned as a place that they kind of hang out and they do meetings as like a pack and like trying to figure out like, are they gonna stay there or are they gonna move, who's gonna be their next pack leader, blah 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 blah. And so I think it's Vivian's uncle who is like organizing all of this and helping out with everything. And he seems like a decent guy, and like you would think that he would become the next pack leader, but he doesn't. He doesn't even want to like go with them. He just wants to stay there because he's like the most normal character out of all of them. He acts more human than the rest of them do, and he's just a really nice guy. What ends up happening is that, and the reason why I bring up the shop is because I'm pretty sure in the movie they make it a very like big thing of like, oh, like Vivian like helps and works. Like she's supposed to be sweet in the movie, but she's not in the book. She's like not a sweet person. So if you've ever seen the movie, it's not what the book is about. The book is like completely different. Vivian, throughout the whole entire novel, she is like throughout the whole entire book, Vivian constantly brings up about how like the way that they change is so special, and like she sees it as like a beautiful thing. You know, she's like really proud to be what she is, whatever. And I feel like maybe like people, when they read this book, they probably thought that she was very like self-centered because she constantly talks about how beautiful she is, which it does make a point that she's like supposed to be very beautiful. They mention her breasts, her hips, like things like that you probably wouldn't normally talk about a 16-year-old in a book nowadays, which I do agree it's a little bit much. But at the same time, like I kind of understand why her beauty is mentioned up so many times. It's not necessarily like her thinking that she's really super beautiful. Like she knows that she's beautiful in her physical form, but when she talks about how like beautiful she is when she is a werewolf, she kind of takes it to heart because she thinks it's a beautiful thing. So when people, you know, humans see them and then they don't understand, she kind of gets hurt by it, which I'm going to mention later on. Which is like a point of reference. It's not the fact that she's trying to be like, you know, self-centered. It's more of like, oh, well, she sees it as a beautiful thing. Like, why don't people see us as beautiful? It's not that like you're not. It's like she doesn't know the words to describe that it's not just beautiful. It's like it's a cool thing to change kind of thing, you know? The reason why I bring that up is that she's also an artist, which isn't mentioned too much throughout the novel. She's really good at art, apparently. And she basically drew this mural. And since moving to the town, nobody really likes her at her school because they're intimidated by her. She draws this, she likes to draw. So one of her teachers notices this and they're like, hey, why don't you draw for our school, like magazine newspaper thing? And she does. And then she notices in the newspaper that another student had wrote a poem. Okay. And like, I don't, like for some reason she's so fixated on this person who wrote this poem because she thinks that, oh, the way that they wrote this poem, they're talking about the changing and how like your bones are crushing and this and this and this. And like, I understand that like this is during a time period that like werewolves aren't really a thing. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure that like it's not like uncommon for people to think that there are werewolves. Like she's fixated on this character who wrote this poem because she thinks that he knows who she is and that like, oh my god, he's so special that he knows about like werewolves. And I'm like, but you also painted an image that looks basically like a werewolf, so like of course he knows what your image is. Most people would know what your image looks like, so therefore that's why he drew that poem. Anyway, so but she thinks that he's special because he knows about it, but I'm pretty sure anybody who looked at that would think instantly like, oh, werewolf. Like, not that you're a werewolf, but that you're drawing werewolves, you know? Anyway, so, and she's fixated on this thing for some reason. And they kind of try to explain that, like, oh, well, like, because werewolves are so attracted to humans because they're so fragile and, like, you want to protect them and this and this and this. And I'm like, I kind of get that, but at the what ends up happening is that she tracks him down. Now, mind you, this character, when I first read this book, I was like, seriously, you like this guy? I don't know why in my head I pictured him a little bit different, like kind of like, I don't know, kind of like a bum. I don't want to say that, but kind of like a bum. Rereading it again, he doesn't look like a bum. He's just like, he seems very like happy and sunshiny and whatever, and like he wears Hawaiian shirts. Like he seems like a teenager who wants to be a dad kind of thing. Like he doesn't seem like, they kind of talk, they kind of make him seem, like later on, like his parents talk about how like, oh, he's a hippie and this and this and this, and like he wears like hippie clothes, and I'm like, all he does is wear Hawaiian shirts and he's like super happy. But then at the same time too, he's into like satanic stuff, so it's kind of weird because like his aesthetic outer appearance doesn't match like his, because they talk about his room and how his room is really dark and he like reads all these like tarot cards and like myth stuff and like has like pentagrams and things like that. And I'm like, okay, like you have all of this in your room, but like your outer appearance doesn't match your inner appearance at all. So it's kind of confusing. because you would look at this guy and just think, okay, he just looks like he gets stoned all day, and like he looks like if he was in college, he would be like a guy who would just get stoned all the time. And like that's the kind of person that I picture. And instead of like him like being all gothic and all that kind of stuff. And I guess that's what kind of like attracts Vivian to him, because she's used to like the bad boys that like look all dark and like moody. Whereas he looks like he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt kind of thing. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. She walks up to him and she gives him like kind of like this like arrogant attitude of like, hey, like I liked your poem, this and this and this. And he's with his friends, and eventually they end up dating. Moral of the story, they're dating, and like her pack is like, no, you can't be dating him, like you can date him, but like know that you belong to us, and eventually like you're gonna have to let him go anyway, you know. And in my head, I think when I was younger, even though I didn't like the guy, I still kind of liked the idea of like she's rebelling. Like that was the whole reason why I think she was dating him. It wasn't just because like she wanted to protect him, it was also because she didn't like, throughout the whole entire novel, she didn't want to do what the rest of the pack was doing. And even like nowadays when I read it, she even talks about how like she doesn't like the fact that they're, you know, changing their ways. They're not like a pack anymore. All they do is fight and argue all the time. So she's kind of trying to like break out from, you know, her family, and she's kind of like rebelling in a way. Like it's supposed to be kind of like a rebelling novel. Now keep in mind, reading this as a kid and reading this nowadays too, it's cool that she's rebelling, and like I wish that that had just stuck throughout the whole entire novel, but it doesn't. Spoiler alert. Are gonna be spoilers ahead. She's doing it mostly out of rebellion, and she ends up falling for him because it's like the first guy that she ends up falling in love with, and the whole entire time she wants to protect him. She's afraid that the group of boys who are in her pack, they killed before, she's afraid that they're gonna kill again, that they're gonna kill her boyfriend, and she is like freaking out, you know, constantly wanting to protect him. And I think the other reason why too she stays with him is because she doesn't feel accepted at home, and her mom is like not really like comforting her. They're not like mourning over the loss of her dad, and they're not that close to begin with, that she starts to make friends with this boy. And I forgot to mention his name. His name is Aiden. Which, when I was a kid, I used to think this is such a stupid character. I hate him, but I still want her to be happy, and I want her to be with a good character, because I didn't like any other character in the book. I really didn't like Vivian all that much, and I really didn't like Aiden all that much. I kind of like them a little bit more nowadays, but I still think that they're kind of like lackluster characters. They're very one-noted. They have some like dimensions to them, but like Vivian, the moment she has progress, then she like takes a few steps back, if that makes sense. She ends up like becoming friends with his friends because she doesn't have any friends at school, and she, you know, was super happy that she's able to do that. And I did like a couple of the scenes that she had with his friends. She ends up like doing a movie night with them, and she has fun. And like for a few moments in that like one little scene, it did seem like she was a normal person and she was acting normal, rather than like, you know, constantly like calling people insults and like being like this like I'm so hot kind of person, and like nobody can like touch me kind of attitude. And she seemed more human, you know. So then she ends up meeting like his parents, and some of the scenes are like, I can tell that they're trying to give like each character like good backstory, but like at the same time I'm like, I don't feel very much for these characters. Like I felt like I was trying to like feel empathy for Aiden and like his family, because he kind of comes from money, but like his parents aren't fully there. Like his parents were really shocked that he managed to date a girl like her, because normally he's into like girls who are very like emo and gothic, and Vivian was like the complete opposite of it. But like the funny thing too is that like she's kind of like very sexualized consistently with like everything that she wears. It's kind of like annoying, because I'm like, I understand she's supposed to be really pretty and like out of his league, but at the same time, like, why are you sexualizing the 16-year-old? It's very weird. We start to get like the hints of like older characters hitting on younger characters in this scene, because his dad is kind of like hitting on her, and she's like she's appalled by it, but at the same time she wants to like mess around with him, like give him like ridiculous ideas, because I don't know why. She's kind of like, she has that attitude. She's very similar to her mom, because her mom does the exact same thing. And the reason why I say that is because It's mentioned a lot of times, and even in comments where people say like it's ridiculous that the mom like dates younger guys because she's like 40. And there's this new character, I guess he wasn't a part of the pack before, but his name is Gabriel, and he is like 24, which is kind of weird to think because he doesn't act like a 24-year-old. He doesn't have like the mentality of a 24-year-old, and I should know because I know a lot of 24-year-old guys and they don't act like this. They more so act like idiots sometimes. He messes around with her mom. He also messes around with another character named Astrid, who kind of becomes important later on. But basically these two girls, her mom and Astrid, are fighting over him because they have a feeling that he's going to be their next pack leader because he's been doing a lot of like leading so far, and like he like scared the 5 straight when they like committed those crimes originally. So like he's been like making a lot of like major moves to be like a pack leader, and they want to basically Esme and Astrid want to be his mate so that they can, you know, run the pack. And Esme specifically, she wants to do that because she doesn't want to like, you know, be seen. She wants to be leader again, helpful to leader again. Anyway, so then you have that. So then you have like moments of like Vivian, she's trying to like, you know, push herself away from the pack. She doesn't want to be a part of it. You know, she kind of like, I feel like at one certain point she doesn't want to be a werewolf. Like she doesn't want to be able to transform. She wants to be more human-like, which, I mean, I get, especially considering that her home life isn't that great and, like, nobody wants to really, like, be part of anything. And I think there are some good moments, like, when Vivian talks about how, like, she loves changing and how she loves to, like, you know, go out on runs with, like, her friends and things like that. But, like, she feels very outcasted, which I understand. Like, I get it. Like, you're not having a good family life and you feel like the human world is a little bit better. But then as the course goes on with her dating Aiden, she starts to notice that, like, if she keeps this up, he's gonna eventually find out that she's a werewolf. Because at one point she, like, it's during, like, a full moon, and, like, the full moon is kind of brought up a couple of times because, like, that's when it's, like, after the fact of the full moon, they have to decide on a leader because they need a new pack leader, and they need to decide if they're gonna stay in the area or if they're gonna go, because they feel like if they stay, they're going to get caught because they're more close to civilization. And Vivian, during a full moon, ends up almost being caught by Aiden because she told him that, like, oh, she can't see him or whatever because the 5 are nearby and she doesn't want them to hurt him. And he comes by and tries to, like, he gives her wine and stuff like that, and is like, oh, I want to see you and I want to hang out with you. But she's like, she can't see him because she feels like she's going to end up changing because of the full moon. And the full moon causes her to change out of her own, like, you know, will. So, she's, like, mid-changing in front of him, and she, like, feels all these things, like, oh, like, my teeth are coming out, and this, and this, and this. But, like, he doesn't notice anything, so I'm kind of wondering if, like, she thinks that she's changing, but she's not. Anyway, so then she tries to, like, come up with an excuse to, like, break up with him because she's like, I'm afraid that I'm gonna end up hurting him or whatever, and, like, what if this happens or what if that happens? So it becomes this whole entire issue that she doesn't want to hurt him, but she still wants to be with him, right? After the full moon, they have to pick a new leader. And this is where, like, the incest stuff happens and, like, the underage relationships, and, like, I understand why people have an issue with this book, or I have an issue with this book, because this whole entire time Vivian is trying to be rebellious, right? She's trying not to be a part of the family anymore because she feels very unwanted. You know, she just lost her dad. She misses him a lot. She wishes that he was there. Even she tells her mom and, like, relatives, like, oh, you know, if dad was here, we wouldn't be having these issues. And then they kind of, like, insult her dad, saying, like, oh, but it was his fault in the first place because had he known about the 5 and had he known about all of this, the fire wouldn't have happened and we wouldn't be in this mess. And, like, to me, that's kind of like, okay, yeah, the guy was, like, very soft and gentle, but he was still your leader. Like, it's kind of annoying that they kind of, like, just insult him after he's dead, and they're like, oh, we need a different kind of leader, we need a leader who's, like, tough and whatever, basically somebody like Gabriel, because he's a he's a tough guy, and he hangs out at this like bar that's kind of like a motorcycle bar where there's like a lot of motorcycle guys, and I bring that up because it's important later on. And Vivian always goes to this bar with her mom because I think her mom works there, and they're like, oh, we can't give your daughter drinks or whatever, but her daughter always gets hit on by like a couple of different biker guys. Her and her daughter get hit on by like a lot of guys. Anyway, so, and even Gabriel hits on Vivian a few times throughout the novel. It's very disturbing because she's 16 and he's 24, which I can see why people have issues with that kind of topic. And I have issues with it too. It's very disturbing. But like the other issue too is that like when you're reading it, you kind of forget how old they are, so then it kind of like, it doesn't make it justifiable, it just like, it makes you forget how old they are. After the full moon, they have this ritual to see who will be the new pack leader. Now, this is where the sexism comes into this novel. There's a lot of sexism in this novel to begin with. Like I said, they sexualize Vivian a lot. This is like the battle of the sexes, where the way that they choose a new mate, originally they would take a vote on it, but for some reason they're like, oh, we're just gonna do the old ways and just make all the males who are like of a certain age fight. But I think for males, it's like they can fight after they're like 21 or something like that. Like they have to be 20 something to fight, and like they basically just transform into wolves, and like whoever's left standing wins. And like it's a really bloody, gory mess. One person ends up dying. They're wolves and they can't really control themselves. Like I said, if they taste blood, sometimes they can't control themselves after a while. But it's only guys who can participate. It's brought up a couple of times by different characters. It's mostly Astrid and Esme who mention, why can't we fight? We're just as tough as them. Why can't we be a part of this? And they're like, oh, but you're supposed to be the mate. And they're like, oh, but we're like in the 20-something century. This is like sexism. Why can't we do this? And so they're like, oh, but you know, like males are technically bigger and stronger multiple times. They mention that. And it's like, it's true sexism at its finest. Prior to them fighting, Astrid mentions it a bunch of times and she's like, no, I want to be a part of it. Let me fight. So they end up letting her fight in it because she wanted to, you know, she really wanted to be like a leader, a part of the group. She's not a good person to begin with in general. It turns out Gabriel ends up winning because he's the strongest out of all of them. Prior to that though, the younger boys, they wanted to join the fight, but they're not old enough because they're in their teens too. But like the weird thing is that the only way the boys can fight is when they're 20 something, but the girls are allowed to participate when they've turned 16. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So then it's the girls' turn. And it's weird throughout the novel because like they'll mention every once in a while that like they'll take off their clothes because like they're turning into wolf form, but like they're all just standing there, and sometimes like they'll do this like randomly, and then like they'll have conversations with each other. So it's kind of like, okay, they're just sitting there naked having conversations with each other and they're just fine with it. So basically they're all like in this circle or whatever, and the guys already won. Gabriel wins. One person ends up dying, and Astrid, she ended up getting beat up in the beginning of the ritual right away, and she got kicked out very, very quickly, which she kind of deserved. Because she's not a great character later on. Anyway, so then it's the girls' turns, right? And the girls get in this line and whatever, and Vivian made it very clear that she did not want to be a part of it at all. She didn't want to be a part of it, but she still kind of had to like be there to witness it. So she gets in the circle and whatever, and then out of the blue, Astrid comes along, and for some reason she's still alive. She comes along and she ends up attacking Esme, Vivian's mom. And Esme really wanted to fight. She really wanted to like be the next queen again. And Astrid ends up fighting her. So she's like over here fighting her, and Vivian sees this, and they're in like animal form. So Vivian sees this, and then she's like freaking out, and she starts to realize that like she is going to end up killing her mom. So without thinking, Vivian goes in and ends up fighting her. She ends up she does it because she just wants to save her mom. But the weird thing is like, the ritual was never started for the girls to start, you know, fighting to see who was going to be the mate and whatever. So they never actually initiated it. But because they fought already they kind of just said like, okay, you know, screw it, who cares about the rules, whatever. She doesn't kill Astrid, she just like really badly injures her. Her mom's still alive. Vivian's like, whatever, I don't care. And Vivian ends up winning and she becomes Gabriel's mate. So she ends up becoming the leader, and she's like, what the hell, like, why are you all like bowing to me? Like, I didn't want to be a part of this. What happened to like tradition and stuff like that? And then she came to realize that like technically nobody else would be able to fight because all of them were either too young or too old, and the only three that were actually able to fight was her mom, and Astrid. Which they never made a point of that to begin with, because we don't actually like hear too much from like other girls. The only three girls that we actually know about is Astrid, Esme, and Vivian. So, with that being said, it's kind of confusing. She becomes the next leader, which as a kid I was super pissed about, because I'm like, are you freaking for real? Now she has to date this guy, and she like, it's just really irritating because he's 24, she's 16. You know she doesn't want to be a part of this, and like you would think that they would kind of just rematch, because like they realized that what Astrid kind of just like came out of nowhere, and like she did that on purpose. So it's kind of like, why would you just let Vivian be the next person? Oh yeah, whatever. She ends up running away. She doesn't want to have anything to do with Gabriel, whatever. She never makes like an inclination that she likes him in general throughout the whole entire novel. Like she just kind of like feels very like intimidated and scared by him, because I mean he's older than her and she doesn't really like him. And he's like, oh, I'll wait for you and this and this and this. And it's like, dude, you're 24. Like, I don't care if you have to be the pack leader. Clearly she doesn't want to be with you. Why are you being creepy about this? Like, stop going after a 16-year-old, dude. She basically is like hiding from him. He's like, I'll wait for you, whatever. Her mom is like, I'm so proud of you. And it's like, seriously, mom? You were literally having sex with this guy like a couple of weeks ago and now you're happy? Like, what? Like, why? Like, in my brain, I'm just like, this is very, very wrong. Like, dude. And he was also sleeping with Astrid. And then Astrid gets pissed off, and then she starts sleeping with Ren, who's like 16. Ren is okay with it because he's getting back at Vivian, because apparently they dated, but they never mentioned that. It's just like spiraling out of control. Anyway, so it's just really awkward. Vivian just wants to be with Aiden. She's like, I'll just run away with him. Maybe I can just show him who I really am. And she ends up doing just that. So it's just like Vivian, like one bad thing after another. Dude, like, why are you doing this? And she shows Aiden who she really is. He freaks out naturally. So when I was a kid, I just thought, you know, this is really weird. Like, why wouldn't he still love her? He just freaks out. He is concerned. He's like, I don't know what the hell you are. He thinks that she tried to like, because originally when she like hit on him and like gave him her phone number, she gave him, like, she wrote it on his palm and she put a pentagram on his palm. So now he's thinking like, oh, you made me your victim. And Vivian is like super pissed that he didn't like reciprocate back, because she thought that he would love her in her like animal form. And she's like, why doesn't he think I'm beautiful? And like the whole entire like word of beauty just feels very like skewed in this novel. Because to her, she thinks like, oh, like, he doesn't think I'm hot looking. But like, no, it's just that like he doesn't understand, because humans are afraid of the unknown. Anyway, so then she gets super pissed off. She is afraid that he's going to end up telling on her after, you know, like the whole first thing that happened, you know, with the fire and whatever. And to make matters worse, she constantly like has these episodes throughout the novel of like, after she shows him what she is, he breaks up with her. He ends up going for this other goth girl, and she's super pissed, and she ends up destroying this girl's room. She does a lot of like, she has episodes of like blackouts, and she gets drunk constantly. And luckily she didn't kill this girl, because then what ends up happening is that like crimes are starting to happen, where like the cops think that it's a dog that's like killing people, and they're not like giving too much word. And throughout the whole entire time, Vivian is thinking that it's her, that she's the one that's killing these people, because they're people that she knows. One of them was like a biker guy that I mentioned in the beginning, that hit on her, and somehow his arm ends up, like his severed arm ends up in her bedroom. So she's thinking that she's killing people. during these blackouts. And she heard that apparently, like, this can happen if, like, you know, a werewolf has a taste for blood, and then all of a sudden they have blackouts, so they can't remember what the hell happened, and they start going on murder sprees. So she's over here, like, panicked, afraid that she's, like, killing these people. Meanwhile, she lost Aiden. Gabriel is just, like, on the hunt for whoever the hell is killing people, and he's trying to, like, you know, he's trying to court Vivian, as he puts it, and Vivian is just not happy to any of this. She's like, maybe I can just run away, maybe I should just kill myself. She comes to the point of, like, I'm just gonna kill myself. Aiden doesn't love me. Aiden apparently thinks that she is the murderer too, because he finds out about this, and he's like, are you sure you didn't murder those people? And she's like, no, I didn't murder anybody. She's just super pissed. Also, Aiden gave her, like, this, at one point he gave her, when they were dating, he gave her, like, this silver pentagram that apparently these werewolves, they can touch silver as long as it's not, like, touching a wound. And, like, her mom was super freaked out by it, because she's like, I don't like that you have, you know, a piece of silver just hanging around your neck. And so she gave it back to Aiden when she got pissed off that he thought that she was the criminal. And then she found another one with the girl that he was then dating after the fact. She got pissed off and she's like, oh, does he just give this to everybody? Apparently he does, because later on her pendant comes up again. Everything is just falling around her, crumbling. You know, she's like, I miss my dad, I wish he was here, I wish things were different. You know, all of this craziness that's happening. And everybody wants her to be with Gabriel. And then she's trying to make Aiden jealous and to think, like, oh, like, I'm over him, even though he kind of, like, just thinks that she's a murderer now. And she's just like, I'm gonna make him jealous by use Gabriel. So she's, like, kissing Gabriel, and I'm like, are you freaking for real? Like, why? Why? You're 16, he's 24. Like, dude. So Aiden over here thinks that she's the murderer, right? And then Vivian ends up convincing herself, and she's just like, well, I guess I'm the murderer. I feel like I'm the murderer. I must be the murderer, right? I have to be the murderer, because I found the severed hand. This guy died. Another guy died. She's, like, just convinced that she killed them. She gets a letter from Aiden, from one of his friends. His friend basically gives her this letter. He told his friends that Vivian and him just got into an argument, and she was, like, super, super abusive and would argue all the time with him. Instead of telling them the truth, he just lied, and she got pissed about that. But, I mean, it's better than him saying that my girlfriend turned into a werewolf. So, I mean, at least he was trying to cover your ass, you idiot. And, like, she instantly regretted, too, like, showing him who she really was. And I'm like, yeah, that was really stupid of you to do. I don't understand why she did that in the first place. I mean, a letter that he wrote for Vivian, he was like, please meet me at this certain point in at time. I want to talk or whatever. She's mad. She's like, no, I don't want to see him. You can just, like, during that exchange, Ren and Astrid are over at a different place making out, and they see them talking. After that, Vivian is, like, convinced that she's the killer. She's like, I killed these people. I'm gonna kill myself. So she's like, I have to kill myself, but I have to do it in a way that won't, like, you know, take forever, because if she just strangles herself or does something, like, ridiculous, not ridiculous, if she does something and it doesn't, like, sever her, like, head off, it won't kill her. Her ability to heal, because they heal very quickly, her ability to heal would just be in the way of that. So she decides that she's just gonna light herself on fire, because she thinks that, like, oh, I should have died in the fire with my dad. It was my fault, because apparently she knew that the boys were going out and, like, doing ridiculous stuff, and she didn't tell her dad about it. And she blames herself because she thinks that she could have stopped those murders from happening, and therefore she could have stopped her dad from dying. Which, I mean, yeah, like, survivor's guilt. She's, you know, she's sad about that. Anyway, so then she goes and tries to kill herself. Then Gabriel comes in the nick of time. Sweetheart, it wasn't you. It wasn't you. And, like, you're not the murderer. And she's like, what do you mean? Like, I found that arm in my room. And so apparently one of the five had overheard Astrid and Ren. And that they had met this guy and they killed him in front of, because Ren wanted, you know, to get even at her, you know, for dating this human, or, like, they like to call him, like, a meat boy. And I'm like, okay. It's it's weird because he calls them a meat boy, and then Gabriel calls them just Homo sapiens, and I'm like, are you for real? You're trying to be all like sophisticated about this shit, dude? Like, seriously? They find out that it's been Astrid and Ren who have been killing these people, because they had killed 2 people already, and that the boy that they had killed in front of Astrid's son turned out to be the same boy who was Aiden's friend who gave her the letter. So they killed him, and that was Aiden's best friend, and Vivian was like completely heartbroken, and she's like, oh my god, they know about the letter, they're gonna go kill Aiden. So then she has no choice, she has to go see Aiden, but she has a feeling that he's gonna end up trying to hurt her because Gabriel had told her, you know, he'll end up hurting you anyway. Aiden meets Vivian. Gabriel ends up going to try and get Astrid and Ren and whatever, but they're too late, and Aiden ends up, you know, telling her, like, I wanted to meet you because I have a feeling that you're killing these people. And also, he's like, I have a gun, because apparently, I forgot to mention this, so his dad was really into making guns. Aiden never liked doing that, and he ended up doing it himself, so he took her necklace, that silver necklace, and made it into a bullet. And so Vivian was like, oh my god, like, I can't believe he did that. And she's like, how many bullets do you have? Because if you don't have enough, the real killers are going to come here. And like, he basically told her, he's like, I'm gonna, you know, put you out of your misery. And the scene when she ends up like revealing herself to him as like a werewolf, she even told him, she's like prior, she told him, she's like, I feel like I didn't make you my victim, you made me your victim, because, you know, I'm over here heartbroken, and I thought you understood, you know, this and this and this, maybe you're the real monster. And like, that scene was probably the best scene in the whole entire novel. Thus far, it was very like impactful, and I felt very, very deeply for Vivian. I'm like, yeah, that's really true. And then the fact that, like, I didn't understand why the hell he wanted to kill her, because she proved to him that she wasn't a murderer. I mean, she had loved him, and, you know, like, why would she go and kill his best friend or anything like that, you know? So it was really weird and random for him to, like, have the guts to try and go kill her. Aiden's character is kind of just, like, a plot device. He doesn't really seem like an actual character, and I really don't like the fact that he just, like, randomly was like, oh, I don't love her now because she's a werewolf. And, like, I feel like in modern day literature, like, that wouldn't be the case. Like, yeah, they would be freaked out, but, like, they wouldn't just, like, up and abandon them, and then they wouldn't just go try to kill them either, you know? Because it doesn't make sense. He didn't have any proof that she was a murderer anyway, to begin with. Ren and Astrid come along, and they're like, oh, we're gonna kill him, and this and this and this, and then Vivian ends up trying to, like, you know, get them to fight against each other, because then she tells Ren, she's like, no, she's just gonna keep killing and whatever, and, you know, and Astrid's like, no, I'm doing this because I want Gabriel, and then Ren's like, I thought you loved me, why do you need him? And, like, Astrid's 40 as well, and she's like, having sex with this 16-year-old, it's just really disturbing. They have, like, an opportunity, Vivian and Aiden, so then she's like, oh, she's like, shoot Ren and I'll get Astrid. And so he doesn't end up shooting Ren, and he actually ends up killing him, surprisingly. She ends up getting injured, she ends up killing Astrid. No, she doesn't kill Astrid, and then Gabriel comes along. He ends up killing Astrid for what she did, because she killed like 3 people, and now they have to move again. And then, so Vivian is in a lot of pain. You know, she was trying to fight off Astrid, and then she comes to, and, like, Aiden is there, and, like, all these werewolves start coming out of the woodworks, pretty much. And she's like, don't hurt him. She's like, just let him go, or whatever. And, like, they were gonna let him go. I feel like they could have let him go. But then, for some weird reason, he, like, gets up, and he's like, he was gonna shoot Gabriel for some weird reason, even though Gabriel was like, no, just, like, he was trying to help him up. So then Vivian comes in front of him, and Aiden shoots Vivian with the silver bullet. And she's like, and basically Gabriel's like, you need to run, you need to leave Aiden, otherwise, if you tell anybody about this, we're gonna come and get you and kill you. And so she ends up surviving the bullet, but she's, like, stuck in between being a human and being a werewolf. She never sees Aiden, she doesn't talk to him anymore. She's stuck in between being a human and being a werewolf, right? And to this day, even though this novel I read, like, a long time ago. They're set to like move, and she's like, I'm gonna stay here forever, I'm just gonna be stuck in here. And like the group of the 5 that are left remaining, they're like trying to cheer her up because she was really close with them as kids, and they're trying to cheer her up, like trying to like basically be half human and be half werewolf, and like just kind of like cheer her up and be like, oh, it's like the latest craze and whatever, and like we're here for you, and like don't feel like you're alone. But because of the silver bullet, she thinks that she basically can't transform back into like human or be a werewolf. And it's because like she's super sad and depressed about like what happened with Aiden, and she wished she could have stayed with him, and then she's mad that she has to be with Gabriel because he's still an issue. And even to this day, even as an adult, I still don't agree with making a 16-year-old in a book end up having to be married to a person who's over the age of 18. I still don't agree with this. It tries to justify itself with Gabriel telling her in the end that he killed a girl who's a human and he loved her, but he accidentally killed her. I forgot, during some kind of altercation. He accidentally killed her by slapping her. And he was talking about like, oh, like they're too fragile, but like, you know, you have to stick with your own kind of thing, you know? And the whole entire time, I feel, because I've read other werewolf stories in the past where like the protagonist like wants to go against the, you know, their pack, and like wants to go against the rules, and tries to like do their own thing, and like tries to date a human or tries to do this, and then they end up like doing that thing. They end up actually like, you know, making changes in the laws and try to actually like, you know, be better and try to like, you know, like have representation for like not just women but also like, you know, like for their kind, and also like, you know, changing the rules and stuff like that. To this day, even when I read this book when I was younger, I still hated the ending. I still hate the ending to this day. The fact that like Aiden just cowered, and I understand that like, oh, but like they told him to leave, but he was a coward to begin with. Like in the beginning, he basically ran away when he saw her, and then he rejected her multiple times. He was a coward to begin with. Even in the beginning of the book, he was a coward. And she only showed herself to him because she thought that he would understand, because he was into a lot of like satanic stuff and like voodoo stuff and all of that. That's the only reason. And, you know, she wanted to rebel against her own, you know, pack and whatever, which I understand. I wish she seems like the type of character that would make waves and like actually be like a rebellious person. And even her mom tells her at one point when like she's betrothed or mated to Gabriel, she's like, oh, you know, your rebellious phase is over, you have to be an adult now. And I'm like, dude, you're not even an adult. You act like a child half the time. So it's kind of annoying that even when I was a kid, I still like understood that I hated the ending, because Aiden was a coward, her family is still an asshole, they really don't care about her. There's like maybe 1 or 2 characters that are okay. I forget, there's another character from the 5 that was a really nice character. I think his name is William. He was a decent person, and Vivian's uncle is a decent person, but everybody else is like an asshole. And then Gabriel tries to like justify himself for wanting to be with Vivian because, oh, I want to make things right because I killed this one girl, and like I understand where you're coming from. Like, dude, you're 24. Like, Vivian's 16. Like, why do you think she would want to mate with you? Like, she's a teenager. I'm pretty sure things are going to happen from this point until she's like 24. And like it just pisses me off that like in the end she ends up being with him and like running away with him and like going out. And like I understand like her thought process is that, oh, but like he's everything that I wanted because he's a part of the pack and whatever. But like the reason why I hate the ending of this novel and why I hate certain aspects of it, it's not because of like the profanity and like the ridiculous certain topics that it talks about. It's more so the fact that like, the topics aside, the fact that like Vivian doesn't have any real substantial growth throughout the novel, because like the beginning of the novel, it's like she is unhappy with her life, she's unhappy with her family, she's unhappy with all of these things, and she wanted to like, you know, make progress and like make friends and like have a relationship and, you know, like be her own independent person. But then by the end of it, she just basically goes back to what she knows. Like she ends up being with Gabriel anyway to begin with, and she ends up staying with the pack and leading them. So it's very counterintuitive, and that's one thing that I don't like about books that are like this, where it's like there's no personal growth, there's no like actual like satisfying resolution because she just ends up back where she was in the beginning. That's what annoyed the crap out of me the whole entire time reading this book when I first read it, because I thought that she was going to be that one girl that would be like, no, I want to fight the guys and I'm going to, like, you know, be the next leader. And if I am the leader, I will, you know, do my own thing. And then I thought, well, maybe she'll run away with Aiden, or maybe she'll try to, like, break the rules of, like, no, I don't want to marry Gabriel, so therefore, you know, like, let's change that rule. But no, instead she just ended up going back with her family and just being like, oh, I'll just fix it and we'll just run away, and who cares if I'm marrying or dating or being with a guy who's like 10 years older than me, it's fine. Like, no, like, that's the thing that, like, I understand some of the messages were pretty okay, and they weren't some of them were pretty bad, but, like, at the same time, like, if the story doesn't, you know, go anywhere, and you have a character that has all this growth in the book, but then just ends up in the same place that they were in the beginning, to me, it's like, what was the point of telling this story at the same time? Like, I appreciate the story for what it was, but at the same time, like, it doesn't go anywhere. She ends up in the exact same spot that she was going to end up in the beginning anyway, because the moment that they talk about, like, oh, that they have to find a new leader, you already know that Vivian's going to end up being the mate to whoever that is. So it's kind of like, what's the point? What was the point of this journey if we didn't go anywhere? Like, all Vivian learned was that she needs to stick with the pack and that humans aren't trustworthy. Like, there's no growth there to begin with. This book, I think it was good for, like, the strides that it made at the time, and, like, yeah, there are some topics that are very taboo and very, like, out there and, like, would not fly today. I'm gonna tell you that much. But, I mean, like, some of the stuff is kind of dated. And I mean, like, there's even one point where, like, saying headphones or earbuds, they call them earphones. So it's a little dated. The cover is a little bit dated. Fun fact, I actually updated this cover for an art class that I had to do. And if you want to see that cover, it's right here. Oh, like, she thinks that Aiden's super sweet, but, like, she wants, like, he's sweet like chocolate, but she wants, like, that blood rush or whatever, but she can't have that with Aiden. But at the same time, like, I don't know, like, this book, I can see why it's controversial. And a lot of people say that it's very, like, reminiscent of Twilight, which I don't know. I mean, maybe Twilight wishes it could be this book, to be honest. I have a love-hate relationship with it. I like some of the things about it. I think it's an okay book. I don't like the ending of it. It's really very bittersweet. And I noticed that a lot about Anita Curtis's books. Like, Silver Kiss was very, very, like, bittersweet. It leaves you very, like, huh? Like, what was the point of the story? Like, we don't go anywhere. We learn stuff that the character doesn't even learn, and, like, there's no progress in the character because the character just ends up in the exact same position that they were in the beginning. So it's kind of like, what was the point of this book? Like, I could take it or leave it. I don't think it's a bad book. I think there are some good moments in here, but the relationship stuff is really not for me. Even, like, in Silver Kiss, the relationship stuff was very, very, like, repetitive and very slow. Nothing happened, and it was kind of depressing too to read. I mean, like, I think I gave this book, like, a 4 or maybe, like, a 3.5 star. I don't think it deserves a 2 because I do like some of the writing in here. It's not bad writing. And actually, some of the writing in here, I feel like I wish more books read like this. I don't know why, but some of the word choices are pretty interesting, to say the least. If I remember correctly, I read this book because I wanted to get into the whole genre of werewolves and, like, vampire stuff, and I was eventually going to read Twilight. This made me not want to read Twilight. Silver Kiss really made me not want to read Twilight either. It made me not want to read a lot of, like, vampire and, like, werewolf stories because I just felt like a lot of it, because this is very tropey. I feel like there's a lot of tropes in here that, like, they're, like, you can tell, like, this is where the tropes started, if that makes sense. Like, and then tropes became, like, really, really, like, cheesy. This one kind of went somewhere, but then it just retreated back into itself, if that makes sense. I don't think this is a bad book if you want to read something that's short and, like, simple and isn't, like, super, super, like, heavily lore based. I think this would be a fine read to read. I'm not trying to discourage anybody from reading it because it actually isn't that bad of a book. It just has a lot of topics that like just wouldn't fly today, and like not everybody is going to be okay with that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see all you guys in the next video. Bye.